The gift of a lifetime is to become aware of who you are. You're burned out at work. You're in a malaise. You're in, what's next? Why do I feel so lost? Depression is the soul refusing to participate in a life that it no longer resonates with. Don't let the modern culture keep you trapped in the ego mask. We're all cosmic beings. Letting the ego collapse and letting the soul come out to play. Letting the soul awaken. And that's when life becomes joyful and really, really easy. What lights you up? Because see, what lights you up corresponds to your soul. You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled, Why You Feel So Lost, Complacent, or Depressed. You know, you might even be wondering, and I'm not sure what applied to you in the headline, but you might be wondering, why do I feel so lost in life? Why am I so apathetic? Why don't I care anymore? Why am I in the doldrums? Why am I being so apathetic? How come I'm in burnout? Well, if any of that resonates with you, you're going to want to listen to this episode because I'm going to talk about where that comes from, and I'm going to talk about how to change that. So, to actually get out of the traps you've been in, keep listening. You know, in the opening, I was talking about maybe being lost, complacent, or depressed. I can relate to that because back in probably 2012 or so. Now, I've been in the field that I'm in now for about 32 years actively. Now, I was dabbling in it prior, but in terms of working in the field, I've been in this field, personal development now for 32 years. And I remember in 2012, I had been doing the same thing for at least a decade. And one day I was just like, I'm bored. I'm burned out. And I got into a rut of my days were just one day after another. And it wasn't like clinical depression, like I needed medication or any of that. It was just a really severe funk. And I'll talk a little bit later in this episode about how to get out of that. But the reason I was inspired to create this particular episode is I know that many times people have big ambitions and they're all excited and they get started and they do something, but then they hit what I call an emotional sandbar. Then the melancholy sets in and the burnout and depression and apathy and maybe anxiety. And the second aspect of this episode is that there are a lot of changes happening on the planet right now. I mean, planet Earth is shifting energetically. The Schumann resonance has sped up. The electromagnetic poles are shifting. And the world around us is shifting. And this is an evolution of consciousness for this species. But I know a lot of people right now they're feeling lost. And that's what I really want to talk about in this episode. Because many people are saying things like, I'm so lost. I'm unhappy. I'm just complacent. I'm bored. And many people are even saying, I don't even know what I want anymore. I've been there a couple of times in my life. If you can relate to any of that, it's all happening for a reason. Now, you might think it's an ego reason, but the reason that it's happening actually is a soul reason. As I said earlier, maybe things that used to excite you, things that you used to love to do, like your career, whatever it is, and you love doing it a particular way. Maybe you've done it for a while, and now you're like, it's boring to me. I just don't want to do this anymore. But what am I going to do? And what's my next step? And then we just go into that pattern of complacency and we kind of numbly and mindlessly go through our days. To supplement this, I want to talk about or to better expand here, or to explain it in a different way, I want to talk about the illusion of identity. Now, if you've listened for any amount of time, you've heard me talk about identity. But most of what I've talked about on the podcast is 3D identity. And what I'm talking about more and more now, and there's a new direction I want to take the podcast, to predominantly being more spiritual in nature and not 3D in nature. 3D would be working on things in your physical life. Things, and this is all important because you've got to manage the 3D to manage the soul, which is the energy. But I want to start talking to you guys more about ancient wisdom and your soulful journey. But the 3D identity, the 3D ego, it's all human created, and it's created through your past history, where you were born, who your parents are, the way you've lived your life, the things you've learned, the schools you went to, what you're good at, what you're not, all these kind of things, they create your ego identity. Now, that's one identity. But the second identity that people really don't explore, and you've heard this before, people will say things like, we are not predominantly human beings. We are first spiritual beings having a human experience. And I've heard variations of that in different ways. And what I tell people is even people can dogmatize spirituality. Many people turn spirituality into a religion. What I feel more comfortable saying is that we are a cosmic being, because there's no dogma around that, meaning we're energetic beings that travel and incarnate in the physical bodies on whatever planet it might be on, because we don't just incarnate on this planet. We're travelers. And most of us know ourselves as the 3D ego identity, but we don't know ourselves as the soul identity. And that's a big topic to cover. And I can't tackle that in one little podcast episode. And I'm not even going to try today. But most of you try to manage your life from your 3D ego identity. But what I want to start doing is helping you set your soul free. Now, I did say just a bit ago, is that both are important. This is why I've said before, on the spiritual side, you have to know yourself as soul. But on the ego side, that is your name. As I said earlier, that is your past history. That's how you identify on the planet. And they're both important because I don't know who designed this entire system. I'm kind of saying that jovially, but the soul is more powerful than the ego because the soul doesn't die and the ego dies with the container of skin that you're living in. But the container of skin that you're living in, the 3D ego, literally controls how much the soul gets to come out and play. Something that dawned on me a couple of weeks ago is try to stay out of the media. I'll check for different things here and there, but the media can be toxicity. And I had to check something on Twitter, my account, a couple of weeks ago. And Twitter is full, in my opinion, of toxicity. And the toxicity is all blue or it's all red in the United States. And what's interesting is to see the red hating on and beating up the blue, and the blue hating on and beating up the red, meaning the Republicans and the Democrats. And so many people will go to great lengths to tear other people down, to demean them, to demoralize them, to criticize them, to make them feel bad or try to make them feel bad. But so many people on either sides of the aisle tear the other side down. And my realization is, and my thought was, these people who do this, number one, they just contribute to the problem. They think because they're promoting their way of life, whatever it might be, that is the correct way and the only way, and everyone should listen to that way and be that way. But where I work from is if you knew yourself as soul, you would know everyone else as soul as well. A phrase I've said before is that everyone is born with an umbilical cord. Everyone is born with a navel. We're all the same. It's that we learn different things, and then many people use those things that they learned to hate on other people. But see, that's the 3D. And the 3D has free will, and the 3D has choice. So these people, out of a lack of awareness, are making these choices to literally hate on themselves. You probably have heard the phrase before, namaste, or phrases, or in Lakesh. Basically, in Lakesh is, I am another you and you are another me. Or the Godhead in me sees the Godhead in you. Basically, we're a reflection of each other. And people on the planet that are trapped in the 3D ego don't even recognize they are a reflection of the people they're beating up on. And the people they're beating up on are a reflection of them. We're all cosmic beings. That's the end of the topic. We are all cosmic beings. We are all cosmic travelers. But back to where I want to go in this episode. It's vital that we know ourselves as the identity and the 3D ego, because we have to function on this planet. I mean, we have bills to pay. We have responsibilities. We've got to, shelter. We've got to put food on the table, a roof over our head. there are 3D things we have to do. So it's important that we learn to manage the 3D ego. Lao Tzu once said, as mighty is he who has power over others, mightier still is he who has power over himself. Most people have no power over the 3D ego. The 3D ego rules them and controls them like a master. But see, that's where we're unleashing the soulful part of us comes in. So back earlier when I started the podcast, I was saying, maybe you're burned out, maybe you're lost, maybe you don't even know what you want anymore. Well, guess what? That's not soul. That is 3D ego. And we have to actually use the 3D ego to facilitate and release the soul. Basically, we need to just relax the 3D ego and let the soul come out and play. In this area that I'm talking about, between the ego and the true self, Carl Jung, quick statement here, Carl Jung said that space is the sacred terrain between the collapse of ego and the birth of self. Now, as I said, we need the ego because we have to exist on this planet, and there are things we have to do. But the longer we live from ego, the more we keep our true self, our soulful self hidden. And we have to relax the ego. When we relax the ego, that's when the self and the soul self, because we've relaxed the ego, is allowed to come out. But many times what we do, the smaller part of us, the human ego, we use that part of us because of our past history and our learning and our conditioning and our indoctrination, and we use it to subjugate the soul, and then the soul suffocates. Now, what inspired this episode was somebody asked me a couple of days ago about this topic. Somebody in the transformational coaching program. I did a live. On the podcast, I do once a week, but in the coaching group and the Be to Have Insiders, I'm in there twice per month coaching. And in TCP, the transformational coaching program, I'm in there daily coaching and mentoring. I prefer the word mentoring. I did a live about what I'm talking about right now. And somebody said, oh my God, that's so me. Now, what preceded me doing the live was the concept of working with a shaman for many years. And when you work with a shaman, you will have what's called a shamanic death. And you may have many of them. I've had probably a dozen over the last 30 years, 28 years. A shamanic death is when, like a snake shedding its skin, it doesn't need the old skin anymore. And the snake sheds the old skin and it's rebirthing itself, so to speak. At least its layer of skin. A shamanic death is when you shed parts of the personality that no longer serve you. You shed those parts of the personality, and that can be very painful. Now, I've had shamanic deaths that have lasted anywhere from maybe a month. The longest one I had lasted 3 years. And I have to look at me. When I look at 3 years, and this was about 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I had that long shamanic death, we have the shamanic death, meaning we get into that place of malaise, of apathy. I don't know what I want to do anymore. We get in that phase, in that place when we're trapped in the ego. And because we're trapped in the ego, the soul has not been awakened. And we have to awaken the soul and let it come out to play, so to speak, as I said earlier. And we have to listen to the soul, because that's where all the wisdom and all the guidance is. But here's the interesting thing. There's a guy that is a internet personality. He's a big personality online. I've heard him say, I don't follow him. I think he hurts people. Now, he doesn't think he hurts people, but it's all from ego, so he doesn't know any differently. And I don't think he's doing it intentionally. He's just out there blabbing and talking about what he talks about. But he says things like, you have to hustle, and you've got to work until your eyeballs bleed, and you've got to grind. Maybe you recognize that phrase. He says things like, you got to work until your eyeballs bleed. That's pure ego. That's all 3D ego. But see, people like this guy, they spew this all over people. It's like casting a net. And so then people think, okay, because we've learned it, to get ahead in life, I've got to work really hard. I've got to put my nose to the grindstone. I've got to sacrifice. I've got to hustle. I've got to grind. And we're rewarded for that. But when we slow down and we go inside and we connect with the soul, for many people, that looks like collapse and regression. And in our culture, We're not rewarded for collapse and regression. We're awarded for being aggressive, which is the opposite. So our society and all these motivators, they're all about progress and progress and progress and moving forward and all these kind of things I'm talking about the hustling and the eyeballs bleeding and the grinding it out. But that's all 3D egos I just said. And we have to work from, what does my soul want? Which is why I have often said we have to know ourselves as soul. So it's really important at this point, please get this. The gift of a lifetime is to become aware of who you are. And when you're experiencing this melancholy or this shutdown or this funk or this depression, which I'll talk about in just a moment, this malaise, I don't know what I want next. Many people go, and I've been there back in 2012. We go into this cycle. It's kind of like an airplane flying and circling the same circle over and over and over. But instead of circling at a high altitude, it's circling at a low altitude. And many of us get into the self-talk of the loss of motivation. And we say things like, what happened to my motivation? I mean, I don't even know what I want anymore. Why do I do what I do? And many of us think that is the end, and it scares the hell out of us. Truth be realized, that's actually the beginning. That's the exciting place. It's the beginning of the next level of you. We'll talk more about this, but I talked about depression. I experienced, and I'll talk more about this in the Secret podcast, but in 1998, I had the triple whammy, as I mentioned before: clinical depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. And to say that was hell would be putting it mildly. I mean, it was hell. And I lived on the beach, not on the beach, like not on the sand. I mean, I lived in a condo on the beach on South Padre Island, Texas, which is near where I grew up. I didn't have money for a therapist, and I had a low-paying job, but I had the depression. By the way, I'm not dispensing mental health advice. I'm not dispensing medical advice. I'm just going to tell you my soulful experience, understanding, and awareness of depression. Take it, leave it, explore it, kick it to the curb. It's entirely up to you. But what I've recognized about depression is many people get into, oh, well, it's all chemical. But see, what they don't understand is, and this is kind of chicken and the egg, but what they don't understand is that the chemical and the physical can be driven and overridden by the mental. The mental is more powerful than the physical, because the mental can live without the physical, but the physical organic body can't live without the mind and the mental. And the epiphany, and I had this experience, so I'm just sharing my experience. Again, not giving you medical advice, take it or leave it. If you need meds, get on meds. You need medical care, mental health care, get it. But what I learned is depression is the soul refusing to participate in a life that it no longer resonates with. Now, let's dial this back a couple of notches. Think about maybe you're in a funk. You're burned out at work. You're in a malaise. You're in, what's next? Why do I feel so lost? Well, that's your soul telling you that you're still trying to participate in the 3D world, and the soul doesn't want to participate in the world and the way you've been doing it. That's your soul, so to speak, knocking on the door, saying, open the door. It's time to go to the next level, a higher level on your path, on your evolution, on your growth. Now, of course, everyone listening, if you didn't resonate with the headline or what I said earlier, you might not even be listening to this point, but this will happen to most of us sooner or later. We hit that ceiling, and then we're like, it doesn't fit anymore. I don't enjoy it. There's got to be something else. And then again, we're like that low altitude plane just circling, and we stay there, and then we feel bad about ourselves because society tells us that's not progress. Society tells us we're not grinding, and we're not hustling, and we're not struggling, and we're not making things happen, and we're not, working till our eyeballs bleed. Therefore, we are bad people. Then we feel bad about ourselves, ego-wise. And people don't talk about what I'm talking about right now. The soul says, hey, let the ego calm down. Here's $1. Go get a Coke. I don't know what Coke's costing them, or a Pepsi or whatever. Go get a cup of coffee. Leave me alone and let the soul come out to play. Now, here's some things that I want you to please just ponder, consider about this episode. For most of your life, Your motivation came from your ego mask. Now, when I say your mask is the mask you've learned to wear as a result of having the ego. Your mask is how you present yourself to the world, how you show up in the world. And you have to understand that your mask was created from an earlier time in your life. So the mask you're wearing now, and especially with all the changes happening on the planet, the mask you're wearing now, it might not fit anymore. It might not be comfortable, and it might even be suffocating. But it's an old mask that you created from a prior and former stage of development. Next is when we awaken and we understand the illusion of the ego mask. Once motivated us, no longer does. I'll give you a transparent and very real life example. Many years ago, money motivated me. And even though I've been working with Don Javier, I wasn't chasing it. I mean, I've never been like, oh, I have to have a lot of money and I have to have a lot of flash. I've never been that way. Even doing this particular episode, I'm wearing a t-shirt. I constantly wear t-shirts, and most of them are cheap t-shirts. I mean, I buy some online. This one's actually not cheap. It's like $150. It was a gift, but it's supposed to block like EMF when I'm at the computer. I only have one of these anyway. But I've never been the one to want to hoard money or have money define me or any of that. But what I want to talk about is all the years that I was building a business, and I've been extraordinarily successful by anyone's imagination for the most part. I mean, even a billionaire would say that I've done a good job at what I've done. Not a billionaire, don't want to be, have no interest, but I've done more than what most people have done. And all those things that motivated me, that I brought a lot of content to the podcast talking about those things, they don't motivate me anymore. That was the old me, the old illusion. And I'm evolving and growing. And I want to take the podcast and evolve and grow with the podcast to be not just spiritual, but to create awareness for you guys. You'll probably see new and different episodes coming, and most of them in that theme. Your old ego, as I said earlier, was written from your old self. That old mask about who and how you have to be in the world. Maybe it's about money to prove yourself or whatever it might be. All that was written not from your soul, but from your ego. And if you're feeling in malaise right now, you're lost. You don't know what your next step is. You don't know what you want. You don't even know what you want to do for a living anymore. The reason that happens is because your old ego script no longer resonates with your soul. And your soul is always going to win. Your soul is going to put things in your path for your learning and your higher evolution. Your soul is going to keep putting things in your path until you learn your lessons. What I want you to, ponder here and understand is I've been there before. And, when I was in this malaise in 2012, I would say I've lost my drive. And then I'd beat myself up. It's like, what's wrong with you? Get your ass out there and get busy and do your stuff. But I was in a funk. But what I want to point out, we tend to think we lose our drive. You didn't lose your drive. That drive's always going to be in you. What you've done is you've outgrown the ego that fueled the drive. You outgrew the ego and the ego reasons and the mask that fueled the drive to do whatever you used to do. Now you've got to go deeper. And until you go deeper, nothing is going to change for you. Now, many people, I've heard people say, well, isn't it, aren't we supposed to eradicate the ego? No, not at all. You need the ego to survive on this planet. We're not here to eradicate the ego. We are here to integrate the ego and the soul. And this is what I call inner unity, inner soul balance. And we literally incarnate with ego, but we don't even remember or recall where we came from. And that's our job in the ego, is to open up and become aware of our soulful mission, of our dharma. You might ask, well, what drives the soul? Okay, Jim, I understand I'm in burnout, I'm in malaise, I'm bored with my job, I don't like my job. How do I get out of this? You have to start working from soul, not from ego mask. And the way you work from soul is alignment. You have to work from alignment. And alignment is what lights you up. Because see, what lights you up corresponds to your soul. What lights me up? So for example, I could say being a CPA, Doesn't light me up in the least bit. Zero interest in being a CPA, anything having to do with being a CPA. But in my industry, my field, this lights me up. I've had a lot of changes this year. There's been a lot of changes in the algorithms. There's been changes with the advent of AI. There's a lot more air quote, even though I don't believe it exists, competition. And the reason I don't believe in competition is no one can do what I can do and I can't do what other people can do. I just have to be a better version of me. But everything's changed. And what used to be so easy has become more challenging. But here's the truth. I can't give up what I do. I'm going to be candid. I thought about just stopping, even though the millions of downloads on this podcast and the amount of people that have said it's helped them, I thought about just being done with it and hanging it up and stopping. But here's the thing, at least for now, I can't because my soul is aligned with it. And whatever my soul is aligned with is what I'm going to follow. So what we can't do is be where I've been before, and I'm sure some of you have been there. We can't get stuck in the collapse of the ego mask. And the ego mask, again, is that we've got to grind it out. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. We have to work really hard. We got to make progress. We have to let that collapse. Like taking a deep breath. We have to listen to that inner calling. What calls us? What inspires us? What keeps us up watching, providing it's career related? What keeps us watching YouTube videos at 1:00 in the morning or listening to podcasts or 1:00? These are the things that resonate with our soul. And we have to correspond to that and we have to listen to that. And when we listen to that, it's kind of like a wrecker. I don't even know if all of you guys know what a wrecker is. A tow truck. Okay, there we go. But I grew up calling them wreckers because my dad was an auto body repairman and they always had a wrecker, a tow truck to go get crashed, damaged vehicles, but a wrecker. So a wrecker would throw a chain or a nylon rope and pull something out of the mud or move something. And that's what happens when you let the ego collapse. The soul, so to speak, throws a lifeline, but you've got to actually grab the lifeline and let it pull you to the soulful side. And this is what scares the hell out of people because this is where the ego mask gets in the way. The ego mask says, whoa, whoa, whoa. How are you going to pay your bills? What are people going to think about you? You shouldn't do that because you can't make a living at that. Your mom and dad are not going to approve. They sent you to college to become some kind of professional, but you want to be an artist. And one of my students in India, I've got a painting that she painted for me here on the wall, which is an extraordinary painting. She did it in acrylic. It's an amazing painting of an owl. Extraordinary. She didn't even start letting that gift fly, no pun intended, until she started working with me. Why? Because in her Indian culture, she had to be a productive professional. She had to have a good education, have a good job, make money, and be a productive person according to her parents. So when we actually let that ego mask start to collapse, that scares a lot of people. And that is the space between, where you are right now, letting the ego collapse and letting the soul come out to play, letting the soul awaken. Because when we let the soul awaken, at a certain point, the soul takes over. We start listening to the soul, and that's when life becomes joyful and really, really easy. Your transformational takeaway on this episode is that modern culture, as I said, the world that we live in has no patience for the collapse of the old self. Because see, the old self is tired of hustling, but the modern culture has no patience with that. You're not rewarded for sitting back and saying, what comes to me? What inspires me? How do I want to express my passion in my life? How do I want to truly live from the inside out? Culture doesn't reward us for that. Actually, culture makes people feel bad for that, which is all ego. And we have to move from the manic striving of doing into the quietness of soulful being. And when we stay in the quietness of soulful being in a short amount of time, the soul, metaphorically speaking, starts to drive the bus. And when the soul starts to drive the bus, that's when the joy comes back. That's when that divinity comes through us and we start having those joyful days again and enjoying living our life. So remember, your transformational takeaway, Don't let the modern culture keep you trapped in the ego mask. Let the ego and the modern culture mask collapse and let your soul come out. Start to know yourself as soul. And that can be a bit nebulous. You want to know yourself as soul, what lights you up, because that is your soul speaking. Let that come out. And then do it well. Do it very well, because anything you do well, you can get paid for doing. And you look around in life, drug dealers get paid, and some drug dealers get paid more than others because they do it well. Some prostitutes get paid more than others because they do it well. Some bankers get paid more than others because they do it well. Some doctors get paid more than others because they do it well. So let that soul energy come out, bring it to life in terms of your occupation, monetize it, and do it well. And like they say, I'll finish up with this. When you do what you love for a living, you'll never work a day in your life. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you over on another episode. Bye-bye.